Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 676. 676, January 27th, 2019, Sunday. Thank you so much for tuning in. Alright, I just want to remind everybody that, of course, we are getting back to that wonderful segment, Dumbass of the Week, beginning on Monday. So I'll be looking for your comments. I'll be reviewing the comments from today's video to see what the vote tally is for the Dumbass of the Week, which I will announce on Monday. So make sure in the comments section today that you put in your vote for who should be the Dumbass of the Week. And if you can put a short comment in there as to why, a brief comment as to why, then that would really help. Of course, it's very easy to put in Madame Botox or Ocasio-Cortez. You can do that, certainly. They're both well-deserving. The problem is they, like Maxine Waters, could win it every week. So feel free to go with one of the trusted favorites, but it's okay if you want to reach out to someone maybe that we don't talk about every day or hasn't been brought up on one of the TowerGate videos. Anyone that you want, you can nominate for Dumbass of the Week. I'll tally it all up, and we'll find out who wins on Monday. So Pelosi sent out a tweet this morning, Madame Botox, and the tweet was the following. What does Putin have on, and then she uses the real Donald Trump, at the real Donald Trump, politically, personally, or financially. So she's asking, what does Putin have on Trump politically, personally, financially? Now, this was a follow-up tweet to a statement she made a day earlier. And the statement that she made a day earlier, which she did not write this statement, I can assure you, this was written for her. The statement is, the indictment of Roger Stone makes it clear that there was a deliberate, coordinated attempt by top Trump campaign officials to influence the 2016 election and to subvert the will of the American people. In the face of 37 indictments, the president continued actions to undermine the special counsel investigation, and this raises questions. What does Putin have on Donald Trump politically, personally, or financially? Again, this was not written by Nancy Pelosi, Madame Botox. This was written by a staffer. No question about it, because she's not this articulate. Okay, there's a lot of things to deal with here. Let's just start with the beginning. The indictment of Roger Stone makes it clear that there was a deliberate, coordinated attempt by top Trump campaign officials to influence the 2016 election and subvert the will of the American people. No, actually, the indictment of Roger Stone proves the exact opposite. Nowhere in the Roger Stone indictment is there anything having to do, really, with Trump-Russia collusion or anything to do with the Russians and Roger Stone. They were all process crimes, crimes that would not have even been crimes prior to the Mueller investigation. These were crimes that evolved out of the Mueller investigation because of Roger Stone's statements to the two different committees in Congress, which is what he's being charged with. It was his testimony to specifically the Senate Intelligence Committee that Mueller's team went through and then have tried to find some problems with. And Roger Stone, by the way, has only been indicted. He has not been convicted, Nancy. That means he's innocent. And there's nothing here. If anything, the indictment of Roger Stone makes it perfectly clear that there was no deliberate, coordinated attempt by Trump campaign officials to influence the 2016 election and subvert the will of the American people. You notice she doesn't say anything here, or whoever wrote it doesn't say anything here about Russia, because they can't. Now, as far as there being a deliberate, coordinated attempt by top Trump campaign officials to influence the 2016 election, well, yeah, that's generally the job of a political operative and everyone that works on the campaign. You could just as easily say that the efforts of Nancy Pelosi and Democrats, the left-wing media, the FBI, Fusion GPS, Perkins Coie, Christopher Steele, and all the rest were a coordinated attempt by the Clinton campaign officials to influence the 2016 election. It's your job as a political operative or as a supporter of one of the political candidates to influence the election. That's what the election is about influencing people to vote a particular way. And everyone's involved in it, on both sides. That's what you're supposed to do, influence people to vote in the election. But she, instead of using the word vote or get involved, she says subvert. Since when is taking part in political activities during an election campaign subverting? You see the language here? And that's what's important here. I don't care about this statement. It's bullshit and she didn't write it. The important thing is why and what is the purpose of this. This is to lay the groundwork. This was written by a Pelosi staffer and it was intended for the media. For the media to let them know, to get warmed up. Because this is the beginning of the outline for the narrative of the impeachment process that will be coming here probably beginning about the end of February, first week of March. Right in that time frame, if you look at the congressional schedule for the new Congress, which has clearly been laid out by the last refuge on Conservative Treehouse. Most of these indictments, they talk about the 37 indictments, not a single one have anything to do with Trump-Russia, coordinating with Russians, colluding with Russians, or anything else. Every damn one of them have something to do with bank fraud, tax fraud, things that happened long before the election, and the stuff with the Russian trolls and Concord management. Those cases are all still being adjudicated. There's no one that's even been found guilty. They're just indictments. And they probably won't be found guilty. How about Maria Veselnitskaya? Do you think she'll be found guilty? I don't think she's going to show up. So this is just bullshit is really what this is. And it's not meant to really do anything other than send a message to the media to get warmed up, to let them know that they need to get in the right mindset, which is the impeachment mindset. And this is the narrative that they're going to run with. They're not going to change the narrative. It doesn't matter how much information comes out about Spygate because they know that the corporate media is not going to make the American people aware of all of the information that we cover here every day on TowerGate. They're not going to tell the public about any of that. They're going to get one story only, and that's Trump-Russia collusion. Trump-Russia collusion, that's the only story in town. It's all they're going to cover, and this is designed to set the table for the media to let them know to get themselves warmed up for what's coming here in the next couple of weeks as they try to ride the Trump-Russia collusion narrative into the sunset or wherever it leads. I'm going to have something more to say about this in just a moment. Things are still not settled in Venezuela. In fact, they may be getting more confusing. So we now had Pompeo at the UN today. The UN is now demanding new elections. What we have going on in Venezuela right now is we have two different governments. Some of the members of one government are in exile from the previous administration before Maduro. We have current members of another government in exile. We have essentially two governments operating. We have the military in Venezuela standing with Maduro, but the military representation at the UN and here in the United States opposing Maduro. We have the economy in complete freefall. There is practically no food in the stores. We have hyperinflation that has now reached 10 million%. There are people who report that if you go into the stores, if you can find anything in the stores, you will see that the inflation is rising so rapidly that they have to change prices literally every hour. The money in Venezuela is essentially worthless. You would probably get more money out of it to gather it all up and weigh it and take it to a paper recycling company. It would be worth more. The average wage in Venezuela is $6 to $8 a month. So everything is in a state of flux right now. Obviously, the CIA is involved in this, but as I said in the previous video, this really wasn't a CIA-initiated coup. I mean, obviously they've been in there meddling in things forever, but I think that they've really been on the passive, kind of on the sidelines, observing. They really didn't have to do very much because the effects of socialism and Maduro on his own have been doing all they need to do. The CIA couldn't have done a better job than Maduro at bringing the country into complete chaos. All they've had to do is sit back and watch and wait for the opportunity when it all begin to crumble and come apart. And then once that happens, they're there to bring in what they believe is a much better alternative, or at least one that's more favorable to the U.S. So certainly there's CIA involvement, but the CIA, this is not your classic CIA coup where they go in and force the issue. This is literally the CIA and many others, of course, sitting back, watching and waiting for the dominoes to fall, and then being there to come in and fill the void with something that they would prefer. Is kind of how that is. But it's still in a state of flux, and it could go either way. I think eventually here in the near future, Maduro will be exiled. He will be gone. I believe that he's not going to survive this. Well, Trump says that Paul Ryan screwed him by not providing border wall funding. Yeah, he's absolutely correct. He not only screwed Trump on border wall funding, but he screwed all of us with Obamacare, and he also screwed all of us on the Spygate. It was Paul Ryan blocking every bit of it. All the things and all the rules that you see being changed by Pelosi so that they can do all this hardcore investigation without notifying Republicans. They can have, essentially, Pelosi is setting up her own private DOJ within the House of Representatives. Ryan could have done all these things. He could have used all the powers that he had in the legislative branch to get to the bottom of Spygate and expose the truth, but he did not. He could have gotten border wall funding in the previous bill, omnibus bill. He did not. He could have got together the votes to a full repeal of Obamacare. He did not. He was a failure on every level. Every level. Never ever forget this about Paul Ryan, because I assure you he will be back in 2024 as a presidential candidate. We must never ever ever let that son of a bitch ever get a single lick of power ever again. Sad news tonight coming out of North Carolina, where we have quite a few subscribers, including the lovely and talented Maura. And it appears that Walter Jones has now been moved to hospice care. Walter Jones is a good guy, decent man, been a pretty good member of Congress, and not with him 100% of the time every time. But he's generally an honest and decent man, and it's sad to hear what's going on with Mr. Jones, Walter Jones. But hopefully that situation, I don't know that he's in hospice. I don't know that once you're generally in hospice, you're generally not coming home. So I guess all you can say is you're best for the family of Walter Jones. And all you folks in North Carolina, you're losing a good man. Hopefully he'll be replaced with an even better man. It was 21 years ago today. 21 years ago today, and I remember it like it was yesterday, when Slick Willie addressed the nation to tell them and to deny ever having any sexual relations with that woman, Monica Lewinsky, when he shook his finger in our face. I did not have sex with that woman, sexual relations with that woman, Monica Lewinsky, not one time, never, and I never told her to lie. Turns out he did have sexual relations, and some pretty kinky ones at that, and he did, in fact, tell her to lie. And that's why he lost his law license, and that's why he was impeached. A lot of people think it was for having sex with Monica Lewinsky. No, it was for obstruction and telling her to lie to the grand jury. Read her book. Watch her interviews. She talks about it openly. That Clinton told her to lie. Period. Now, in regards to Nancy Pelosi's statement that was prepared for her, that she released the day that Roger Stone was arrested, suggesting that Donald Trump and his campaign team somehow were trying to undermine the election or influence the election, or what's her exact wording? That there was a deliberate, coordinated attempt to influence the 2016 election and subvert the will of the American people. Let's go with that. But why don't we take a look at the rotten Reverend Clinton? The rotten Reverend Clinton, who actually did attempt to influence the 2016 election and subvert the will of the American people. Let's keep in mind that without the rotten Reverend Clinton's dossier, there would have not been a Carter Page FISA warrant, or a Mueller probe, or a Spygate conspiracy. Let's look at the last thing that Christopher Steele said under oath, under perjury of penalty, in his deposition. He said the following, quote, "I was hired by a Democratic law firm in preparation for Hillary Clinton challenging the results of the 2020 election." He says he was hired for the very sole purpose of challenging the election. When was he hired? Well, we have two stories. We're told he was hired in April of 2016 by Confusion GPS. But there's other evidence that would suggest that he was actually working in some capacity as early as March of 2016 and maybe earlier. Listen very carefully, Mr. Barr, because the Republic is writing on it. You need, Mr. Barr, to convene a grand jury and subpoena the rotten Reverend Clinton. Now, I want to give you, Mr. Barr, in case you need a little guidance from someone who's been following the conspiracy, the criminal conspiracy, for a long time, I want to give you some guidance on what questions you may want to ask when you convene a grand jury and call as your first witness the rotten Reverend Clinton. So I am going to go through some questions that I would ask if I were on that team working for Mr. Barr, deposing the rotten Reverend Clinton in front of a grand jury under oath. Oh yes, she'll definitely be under oath this time. Now keep in mind, these are first-tier questions. The way you question a witness is you ask them a question and you wait for the response, and then the response to that question is where you actually begin to dig down. You dig down and drill down until you finally expose and get to the bottom of the truth, because they'll almost always lie or claim they don't know or this and that and the other thing on the first question. These types of questions are questions you ask as setup questions to get the response, which you can generally predict what it will be, and then you have a series of follow-up questions. So these are the initial questions, the setup questions that you ask to get to the truth. Let's go through them, shall we? So, if the rotten Reverend Clinton were there in the grand jury hearings, having been placed under oath, and I were one of the attorneys doing the questioning, at my opportunity to ask questions, I would ask the following of the rotten Reverend. I would say, Reverend, you're aware of the recent deposition in which Christopher Steele stated under oath, under penalty of perjury, that, quote, I was hired by a Democratic law firm in preparation for Hillary Clinton challenging the results of the 2020 election. Is the above statement, Reverend, by Christopher Steele true? Reverend, you hired Perkins Coie to be the middleman or straw man to commission a dossier on Donald Trump. Is that correct? Keep in mind how this worked out. It was originally Glenn Simpson who in the month of March of 2016, he went to Perkins Coie and volunteered his services and showed them all the good dirt he had and why they should hire him. Then, on April the 10th, just a couple of weeks later, Mary Jacoby, Glenn Simpson's wife, shows up at the White House. 1 week later, Perkins Coie brings in or hires Confusion GPS. That's how that went down. Now, Reverend, did you make the decision to hire Confusion GPS, or did Perkins Coie make that decision on their own? Reverend, once paying for the dossier via Perkins Coie, were you or anyone on your campaign kept informed on the opposition research that was coming in, being generated by Perkins Coie and Confusion GPS? Were you kept aware of the progress that was being learned? If so, how often and who were the contacts between your campaign and Perkins Coie or Confusion GPS? Reverend, was John Podesta aware of the work being done by Confusion GPS to your knowledge? He was your campaign chair. If so, when and how was that handled? And did Podesta brief you? And if so, how often? Reverend, do you know Christopher Steele personally? Did you ever speak to him directly or indirectly, or communicate with him in any way, yourself or through an intermediary, from the period of October 2015 until the period ending November 2017? Reverend, did you know about Cody Shearer's dossier? If so, when did you become aware of it? Did you or anyone in your campaign direct Mr. Shearer to produce his dossier? Reverend, did you or anyone in your campaign direct Sidney Blumenthal to acquire the Shearer dossier from him? Reverend, did you or anyone on your team direct Sidney Blumenthal to make contact with Mr. Steele or anyone in the U.S. State Department to give the Shearer dossier to anyone? Reverend, did you direct Shearer to give the dossier to Blumenthal and then direct Blumenthal to give the dossier to Steele? Did you direct that yourself personally or through an intermediary? Reverend, did you or anyone in your campaign staff feed information about Trump having ties to Russia to any media organizations? If so, what media organizations and who fed them the information? Reverend Clinton, do you know John Brennan personally? Did you have any communication with Brennan, directly or indirectly, from October 2015 to November 2017? Reverend, do you know Stefan Halper personally? Did you have any communication with Halper, directly or indirectly, from the period of October 2015 to November 2017? Reverend, did you know anyone on? Do you or anyone on your campaign? Did you or anyone on your campaign have advanced knowledge of the Trump Tower meeting? Rotten Reverend Clinton, did you directly or indirectly have conversation about the Trump Tower meeting with anyone at Perkins Coie prior to or after the Trump Tower meeting? Rotten Reverend, did you know Rinat Akhmetian? Did you speak to him directly or indirectly between October 2015 and November 2017? Rotten Reverend Clinton, Were you or anyone at Confusion GPS or Perkins Coie involved in setting up the Trump Tower meeting? Anyone on your campaign, anyone at Confusion GPS or Perkins Coie involved in setting up the Trump Tower meeting? Reverend, did you communicate with Michael Isikoff directly or indirectly from October 2015 to November 2017? Reverend, do you know about the meeting between Attorney General Lynch and your husband? Did you know about the meeting between Attorney General Lynch and your husband prior to it being reported by the media? Did your husband tell you about his intention to meet with Lynch? Reverend, do you know Joseph Misfud? How did you meet him? When and where? How many times did you talk with him from October 2015, November 2017? And that could be any form of communication, written, verbal, or through a third party. Reverend, did you ever direct anyone to make contact with Joseph Misfud? Reverend, do you know Alexander Downer? Did you communicate with Mr. Downer directly or indirectly from October 2015 through November 2017? Reverend, when and how did you learn of the counterintelligence operation into Donald Trump and the Trump campaign? When and how did you learn about the counterintelligence operation into Donald Trump and his campaign? Reverend, do you know that Michael Sussman, did you know that Michael Sussman was meeting with General Counsel of the FBI, James Baker? Do you know who directed him to do that? Did your campaign direct that decision to Perkins Coie or Fusion GPS? Or did one of them make that decision on their own? Were you involved in any way in the decision to have Mr. Sussman of Perkins Coie, your lawyer, briefing the FBI? Reverend, did you speak with John McCain directly or indirectly regarding the investigation into Trump-Russia collusion? Reverend, did you direct the Democratic National Committee to hire Perkins Coie? Reverend, did you direct Perkins Coie to hire Confusion GPS? Reverend Clinton, did you ever communicate with President Obama about the investigation into Trump-Russia collusion directly or indirectly? Rotten Reverend Clinton, did you use your private server to conduct Clinton Foundation business or State Department business? Reverend, did you ever communicate to Glenn Simpson or Mary Jacoby directly or indirectly from October 2015 to November 2017? Reverend, did you or anyone on your campaign staff have any involvement or knowledge of the Russian lawyer Veselnitskaya, Natalia Veselnitskaya's work for Confusion GPS? Did you or anyone on your staff have any knowledge or involvement in Veselnitskaya going to work for Confusion GPS? Reverend, do you know or have you ever met any of the following individuals that were in attendance at the Trump Tower meeting? Did you know Natalia Veselnitskaya, Rob Goldstone, Rinat Akhmechan, or Anatoly Samachornov? Reverend, did you know Bruce or Nellie Orr? Did you know that Bruce Orr was feeding information directly to the FBI? Reverend, did you ever communicate directly or indirectly with any member of any foreign government about the Trump-Russia matter. Reverend, do you know Oleg Deripaska? Did you ever communicate directly or indirectly with him? How about Sergei Milian? Reverend, was the dossier an insurance policy the insurance policy that Peter Strzok spoke of? And if it was that your idea? Reverend, were you aware of the surveillance going on with Trump campaign officials? How and when did you become aware of it? Reverend, were you aware of private contractors accessing the NSA database? If so, how and when did you become aware of it? Reverend, did you or anyone in your campaign coordinate or communicate with anyone in the Obama administration regarding the investigations into Trump and his campaign from October 2015 to November 2017? Reverend, did you and your campaign devise the plot to smear Trump and his campaign in an effort to destroy his candidacy and later his presidency? And if so, was that in contradiction or coordination, I should say, was that in coordination with government agencies under the Obama administration or of any foreign governments? Let me ask you that one more time, Reverend. Did you and your campaign devise the plot to smear Trump and his campaign in an effort to destroy his candidacy and later his presidency? And if so, was that in coordination with any government agencies under the Obama administration and of any foreign governments? One last question, Reverend. Were you or are you aware of any weapons being moved out of Libya to anywhere? That's just a warm-up. I'm out of time. I got about another 50 to 100 questions I would ask. Those are the initial questions. Of course, to each of those questions, I have a pretty good idea what her answer would be, and I would have follow-up, 2, 3, 4, 5 follow-up questions to each of those questions. Mr. Barr, these questions, Mr. Barr, should be asked of the Right Reverend Clinton when she's seated in front of a grand jury under oath under penalty of perjury. And she should be the first witness on tap, Mr. Barr. And that's the answer to your question, Madam Botox, about interfering or affecting the 2016 election, and who was actually involved in that using illegal means. The state of the Republic, the history of the Republic rides on Mr. Barr. We're going to learn an awful lot in the next few weeks. I understand he'll be confirmed somewhere around the first week of March. There are supposed to be some hearings this week. I don't believe he'll be present in those hearings, but he's had to submit a lot of written documents which are being gone over. So they're going to get together with intercommittee discussion and discuss these things. Then there'll be about a week where they go back to the respective corners and review what they talked about. Then they'll schedule a vote, which will likely be 2 to 3 weeks later. So we're going to find out a lot here very soon, and it better happen very soon because time is running out. One last thing. This Russian woman who claimed that she had, the Belarusian woman, prostitute, who claimed that she had all that information about Trump-Russia to get out of jail, and who was then arrested in Russia, has now been in court and has made her statement. And she says that she made it all up just to get someone to bail her out of jail. She knows nothing about Trump-Russia anything. She did it to get out of jail. There you go. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be checking the comment section for the dumbass of the week. Have a good night. See you guys. Bye.